Major support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. And Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
There seem to be real irreconcilable differences between the soundness and the fundamental strength of this economy and our straight-up business and everything else. For instance, how we feel about each other, our politics, our education, our prospects for this year. So where is the disconnect between that feeling of unease and how good this economy really is? And how will that unfold this year? Welcome again to the most widely watched source of Carolina business policy and public affairs. I am Chris William, and I hope it's not too late to still say Happy New Year. Thank you for supporting this dialogue all these years. Coming up, Ted Pitts from the South Carolina Chamber and Dr. John Silvia of Dynamic Economic Strategy. And later on, Bruce Nelson, former Office Depot CEO turned small business owner and farmer. Stay with us.
Gratefully acknowledging support by Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, an independent licensee of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association. Visit us at southcarolinablues.com. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. BARINGS, a leading global asset management firm dedicated to meeting the evolving investment and capital needs of its clients. Learn more at barings.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Ted Pitts from the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce, John Silvia of Dynamic Economic Strategy, and special guest Bruce Nelson, co-owner of Reverence Farms and Cafe.
Hello, welcome to our program. Can I still say Happy New Year? Is that allowed?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, we could say it for a while. Dr. Silvia, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
Ted, good to have you here.
Good to be here.
John, what is this disconnect between arguably, and I'm pretty passionate about this because you look at literally, this may be, if we make it to June, as you well know, this will be the longest economic expansion in the U.S. history. That's saying something. But yet there is this sense of unease that people feel. We've seen it fourth quarter in the stock market in the first part of January. Where's the disconnect?
I think there are two issues. One is the Fed and what's Fed policy going forward.
But why is that any different? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Why is that any different than any other Fed?
I think because the Fed was pretty committed to a path of raising interest rates and shrinking their balance sheet. But some of the more recent economic data, beginning in October and November, December, have supported the view that the economy may not be as strong as what the Fed had expected. But I think the second issue that I think is more important for the Carolinas is trade. One thing I've been impressed with ever since I came to North Carolina was the international aspect of the Carolinas economy. Beginning with so many foreign chamber of commerces in the Charlotte area, biotech out in Raleigh. We were talking earlier about my experience in South Carolina with respect to Boeing putting up something in Charleston, the Mercedes-Benz plant throwing out these Sprinter vans. I think it's trade that has really created a lot of uncertainty. And in the last week or two, we've seen weakness with respect to orders and capital spending plans on the part of business.
Ted, same question. Where is the unease when clearly, when you look by the numbers, this economy is good and the prospects, at least through the summer, are good?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at what companies are doing now, I mean, they're not changing their plans, but they, as you look out on the horizon, there's concern. And I think part of it's just based on how long it's been good for. And, you know, when you look at cycles, you know, I think that they've come out of the last recession, if you will, in 2008 and 2009, and they don't want to be caught in the same situation they were caught then. So I just think that when you look at a cycle and you say we've had a good long run, things are good, you know. So I mean, I think companies are just being a little apprehensive.
Do you think it's a little, this is my analogy, but whistling past the graveyard?
Yeah, I mean, you can use that term. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just being cautiously aware of what's going on around them. You know, you reference trade. That's obviously something that has a huge impact, can have a huge impact on the economy of the Carolinas. You know, we punch well above our weight, and you know, we have a lot of foreign direct investment that is apprehensive about what's going on around the world. And you know, I think companies are just being cautious and careful.
John, statistically, if you look at, so as you said before, and this is my term, North and South Carolina are both net exporters of goods and services. Do you think that given any lack of agreement on trade, the longer this goes on, the more uncertainty that is kind of deployed across the Carolinas, that this could have a meaningful impact on manufacturers and exporters, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, meaningful, probably not create a recession, but I think it will discourage foreign direct investment into the U.S. It'll concern a lot of firms in the Carolinas that maybe some of their production and suppliers abroad may be impacted by tariffs. So yeah, over time, we've developed quite an international exposure in the Carolinas. We've done a really good job on that. I am so impressed. But that also means that the international aspects are very important in terms of business planning.
Ted, do you speak internally? And I'm not asking you to give me any internal or proprietary information, but aerospace and automotive are clearly two big stakes in the ground in South Carolina, and that is meaningful when it comes to international trade. Is that more than a passing concern for business and leaders in South Carolina?
I'll tell you, having the new USMCA, the NAFTA 2.0, having that in place, companies appreciate that. I mean, it's a 25-year-old agreement. The old NAFTA needed to be renegotiated. You know, I think they're still hopeful that, you know, with our other trade partners around the globe, that that agreements can be put in place. You know, obviously China's the big unknown, and you know, there's a lot of conversation about what needs to be done there. China cheats. We hear that all the time, but also China provides a lot of products that go into goods that are made here in the Carolinas, and a lot of things that Carolinians consume. So,
do you still hear a lot of kind of off the record comments from people that are privately cheering on the Trump administration to get something in place with China? So
cheering on's probably too strong of a term. It's when you talk about trade, there are different broad views on what needs to be done. Some think this president and the administration's taking the right approach. You've got to play hardball with China. Others say that there is a better, more productive way to get us to the end. It's to, you know, come together with our other trade partners in Europe, and let's work on China together. So, I mean, you hear very differing views about what should be done or how it should be approached. But most people would say it's time to deal with China and the issues that, the unfair trade issues that have grown over time there.
And I think that the whole issue on services is important because the Carolinas, to me, have really evolved into producing intellectual property. There's no doubt that a lot of the engineering and science that the Carolinas produce, that intellectual property aspect is very important. So the Carolinas are not so much just bend metal and produce something. We are really broad in that area, and that's why working with China and trying to get some agreements there are really critical.
As a one-off for you, John, when you look at things like housing, and there's a lot of talk in at least the urban cores that affordable housing has become an issue as the growth happens, as old neighborhoods are gentrified, or in some cases re-gentrified. How critical is this issue about affordable housing, or is it specific to the highest growth areas?
I think it's probably pretty specific to the highest growth areas, but it does compound itself with respect to commuting. I mean, to me, what you're seeing is that, and I'll give you the Charlotte experience, a lot of the areas are being upscaled, enlarged in terms of the homes and the housing, and what's happening is some other people are being pushed out a little bit, but then that creates a lot of traffic on 77, for example, or 85 or 485. So yeah, I mean, the challenge on housing affordability has repercussions when we talk about transportation.
Ted, specific to South Carolina, first week of the new year, Dominion finally announced that they were, in fact, and did purchase the assets and the debt of SCANA. That was a plus $13 billion acquisition. So that seems to be the first major announcement.
Yeah.
Do we expect to see other major announcements coming from Dominion and now what's called the Southeast Energy Group?
You know, I think first, customers are happy that Dominion, the merger is complete. There's certainty now. You know, businesses are the largest ratepayer segment of that group, and you know, Dominion's a very reputable operator that has a good track record. So I think, you know, folks expect Dominion to come in and run it like a business, right? So, you know, there'll be other changes that are made, but I think all in all, you know, the failure of VC Sumner is, it's good to have part of it behind us now and to be moving forward. And hopefully Dominion can come in and, you know, get rates competitive and ratepayers ultimately win from that.
I do wonder how much, and this is of course my term, wonder how much patience Dominion will have as they interact now with the State House and the public staff around some of these large issues like who's going to pay for what and when these things get settled. How would you characterize it?
You know, as a regulated utility, Dominion understands how to work inside the State House with policymakers. They understand how to take care of ratepayers, be a good corporate citizen. They know how to do all those things. This isn't their first rodeo. I think Dominion's going to come in and end up being a very strong operator that ultimately is going to be good for ratepayers.
You know, and to highlight one of your points, certainty is a good thing to have, and clearly have that. Now, gentlemen, stay with us. Coming up on our program the next few weeks, some what we think are really good dialogues again. Molly Spearman is the Secretary of Education in the Palmetto State. She comes back to our program not just to talk about wins and losses in education, but where South Carolina will go now. Also, Lynn Good, the chairwoman and CEO of Duke Energy. Speaking of utility companies, Lynn Good will be on our program again. And then Jim Newsom runs the South Carolina Ports Authority. If anyone has felt trade and the effect of a trade dispute, it has been the ports in South Carolina. We'll unpack that with Jim Newsom. Like many people before him, after decades in a corporate job, our guest thought that retiring in Florida after running a publicly traded company sounded like a pretty good idea, and it probably was for a time. But a detour and his daughter brought him to the Carolinas. Joining us now is the retired chairman and chief executive officer of Office Depot, and now the co-owner of Reverence Farms and Cafe in Graham, North Carolina, Bruce Nelson. Welcome to North Carolina. Welcome to the Carolinas, Bruce.
Well, thank you, and thanks for having me. It's delightful to be here.
Bruce, let me start with something fairly broad that we did at the beginning. So here we have, and you seem like a pretty just generally optimistic guy. So we've got this great economy. You've got good business. You seem pretty upbeat about the prospects of Reverence Farms and Cafe. Yeah. Where is the disconnect between how people feel about things and the fundamental nature of this economy right now?
I think there's data, and then I think there's a real issue called uncertainty. We're living in some pretty uncertain times. We've not gone through this politically, what we're going through. We've not gone through the trade wars we're going through at the time. And I think ultimately it creates uncertainty. And in the end, companies make investment decisions because consumers buy their products. If consumers don't have confidence and they stop buying, that's the ripple effect. And we have consumers, we've got a government that's in shutdown, we've got adversarial relationships. I think it creates uncertainty, and that uncertainty leads to cycles.
So you think it has finally raised its head and become an issue larger than just this thing that's been running in the background?
I do. Yeah, I do.
How long of a tail do you think this kind of uncertainty has on it?
We're in different times. I mean, politically, we've never been like this before. We've never been as much angst politically as we seem to have today. And that sets a tone. And so the answer is we've got 2 years now, we've got a divided Congress. And that's what you read about, hear about, speak about, people talk about. And we've got a government in shutdown. So I don't know, it could have a long tail. Is it a recession? There are experts, and I'm not one of those. But I can tell you, people around us, I can say are beginning to hunker down a little bit. Should I spend that discretionary? Am I going to eat this week at my cafe? Am I going to have a job next week? All of those, any one decision's not big, but the compound effect of those is significant.
I promise we are going to get to Reverence Farms and Cafe here
right.
before the program is over. John?
So Today's unemployment rate in the U.S. economy for the last 6 months or so has been very, very low.
Yeah.
How do you motivate workers other than just paying them something in terms of a wage and tips in a restaurant business? How do you motivate them to do well beyond just dollar compensation?
It's called one word, culture. You know, you compete for workforce. And so if I said at Office Depot, if it's not a compelling place to work, it will not be a compelling place to shop. And so how do you make the work environment compelling? So we pay a living wage, but pay's not enough. So do they have an opportunity to speak out? Can they grow? Can they learn? Can they participate? Do they trust in the decisions that we make? What kind of interaction do they have with their people? What rules do we have, and are they broad or are they narrow? And how we execute that? It's all about people. You know, 100% of our customers are people. 100% of the people who work in our restaurant are people. And if you don't understand people, you don't understand business. It's culture. And I spend more time at culture than I do on financial statements and anything else, trying to get people to say this is a good place to work.
Thank you.
And back up the actions with those words.
Ted.
Bruce, when you look at building a brand and marketing a company, you know, obviously at Office Depot, you do it a certain way. You know, as you've started on this new endeavor, how have you approached trying to build a brand and marketing, you know, having people eat at your restaurant, shop at your farm versus the one down the road?
This is where really the difference comes into play. So at Office Depot, I had billions to do this. At Reverence Farmers Cafe, we got a few bucks.
Yeah.
And the answer is, you know, Office Depot was all about media, television, and buys, and ad buys, and flyers. At Reverence Farms, it's about social media and how you get good at social media and how you try to get customers to speak to you about one customer at a time. It's social media and word of mouth, and it's much larger scale and slower. It's cost less, but it takes longer.
You know, so you've gone from this position, I don't want to spend too much time on the change, but you've gone from this position of somebody holds your door, you fly by corporate jet, you have your, you know, so on and so forth, and now you're running, what's your head count in the cafe?
20.
Okay, you got 20 people. How many is the farm employ?
About another 15 or 20.
Okay, so you've got a small business. My question about this, and I know you'll appreciate this, is your business, is it financially sustainable and is it scalable? Can you replicate what you've done in other rural communities?
The answer is I don't know that we can. The answer is it has to be sustainable. The way we farm has to be sustainable if we're going to survive. That's a long story, but it's about sustainable agriculture. And it's about putting back into land what we so extract. That we have to get better at raising food in a wholesome manner. So the answer is I do think economics is sustainable. Both our businesses are not profitable today. And the only reason we're able to come out with is we play the long game. But I believe both are sustainable ideas. I think there's something happening with people about food and quality and service, wanting to buy local, to be involved locally, to purchase locally, to buy healthy food, and those things I think are in true fact sustainable.
Did you have, and again this is just kind of a sub-reference, but was there a road to Damascus moment for you now that you're running a cafe where you said, you know, I'd forgotten about this part of the business that's very important to know?
Maybe to the point you made earlier, when you fly around the world on a corporate jet and everybody opens your door and everybody treats you like a small king.
And all your answers are right.
And all your answers are right, and nobody tells you really the truth. Not really. I mean, they don't lie, they just don't tell you everything. The reality of the fact that you now, and in a corporate environment, it's not your money. It's somebody else's money. This is our money. And so a loss is real. It's not a digit. And so the realization that a financial statement of a $20 billion company are a bunch of numbers. The financial statement of a small business are, tell me about cash and cash flow, and tell me about payroll next week, and tell me how you're getting more customers. So it's that reality you went, wow, That sets a whole new course up. And now, for the bigger company, you're far removed from people, so you don't feel so personally involved with them. Now your cook is out for a week because he's sick, and you think to yourself, wow, what can I do to make him more healthy? And how can I help him a bit? Because he's so vital to the company. Scale.
Yeah. John?
So obviously I cheated. I went online, looked at your menu, and the first thing I thought was, where are they getting all this stuff? And you say local, but wow, I was impressed at the extensive menu and the choices that you have. And all of that comes within 500 miles or something?
No, try 5 or 10 miles.
That's amazing.
So all the protein in our cafe, if it's meat, we raised it on our farm, and that's 3 miles from our cafe. That's 400 acres of 7 kinds of animals.
So this is truly local.
That's local. Vegetables are truly local. I mean, 70% of our vegetables are bought within 10 miles of our cafe.
Amazing.
We still buy from the food truck. In the winter, it's harder to get local, but this is truly local. This is real food and real local.
That's pretty cool.
Ted?
When you talk about running a restaurant, obviously it's humbling. You probably got to wash dishes sometimes.
I've done that.
Yeah, you probably got to do a little bit of everything. The customer base that you're building, is it a return customer base? How often do they eat in your restaurant a week? Or is it unique visits? I mean, how do you kind of build together your customer base?
Well, the answer is it's a combination of both. I mean, you have to earn the loyalty of the people that come back, and you got to serve them good quality food that's healthy, tastes good, and the service was good, and you hope they come back. But you can't just depend on that to grow. So right now, about 50% of our customers are first-time customers, and we're in two fields. We're in a comfort food, come and have a nice dish of meatloaf that's the best meatloaf you'll ever eat. And then we've got some exotic things on the menu that try to appeal to more foodies, if you will. So we get people from the local area that come to our cafe and say, well, you're a little pricey. Your hamburger's $14. We get people that come from Chapel Hill and say, wow, this is good, this is really inexpensive. And we live in both of those worlds, and you have to figure out how to do that as well as you can.
Do you feel any tug coming from the corporate environment? As you said, you can read a spreadsheet pretty well, and you understand the physics of how money moves within a company, Bruce. But you also pay a living wage.
We do.
In the restaurant, which is about $12 an hour.
It is.
How do you, I don't mean to be respectful, but how do you do that? That is above market, and yet you've got to settle accounts at the end of the day.
That single issue is the reason we're not profitable, is our wages. And the answer is our family looks at this as the long game. To say, first of all, I think it's going to get us better people. Second of all, I think they're going to stay with us longer. Third of all, they're going to be more skilled. They can do more than one thing. And in the end, I think it wins. But it goes back, that's our family values. It's just we run a business based on our values, and that's one of our values. And if it means we make less, that's okay. For me and my family, I don't have to make this to be $1 million. I made enough in corporate America to make it work. I just want to make enough that it's sustainable, and I want it to be a place where people say they're good to the economy, they're good to the environment, and they're good to people. And that means paying a living wage.
And again, I'm not going to be disrespectful, Bruce. I will say that people will say, yeah, but Bruce is on full scholarship. He was a retired CEO. He's got a pile of money, and I don't want to say that disrespectfully, but that does factor into you being able to play the long game, doesn't it?
It does it does factor in, of course, but it's not. As I tell people in the cafe, what we're doing you can't sustain for 10 years because that bank account will be gone. But it's bigger than that. I think of myself as a good steward. I've been given a lot. I think it's my responsibility to give back. And I believe that works. And I'm willing to gut it out for a year or two. I really am.
We have about a minute left. Quick question, follow-up.
I would follow up with the old Nucor story. That Nucor would set up these steel mills in very rural areas, pay these people an above market wage. And I do remember the story where, the wife would say to the husband,
they breed loyalty?
Yeah, absolutely. You are going to work on that job, you're going to do that job, and I'll kill you if you ever get fired.
So is it more than, to use that term, is it more than loyalty, or is it more than a bottom line?
For us, it is. I mean, if you use a term, it's a triple bottom line.
Yeah.
It's about people, profit, and planet. And I think in the end, that's where our economy goes anyway. I really do.
Bruce, thanks for taking the time to drive in from Graham and be on the program, especially when you're the cook and you're also washing dishes in the back.
I'm not the cook. That's the only thing I can't do in the cook.
It's probably safe, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
Nice
you for
to see
having me.
Good to have you here.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Nice to meet both of you.
Ted, good to see you. Welcome.
good to see
Good
you.
to have you back, as always. John, I'm just going to leave it at that. John.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you for watching our program. Coming up, as I said, Molly Spearman, Secretary of Education in South Carolina. Also, Lynn Good. Very important dialogue with the head of Duke Energy about where that industry going. Also, Jim Newsom from the South Carolina Ports Authority. We hope your new year is good, that your weekend is good. Thank you for watching. Until next week, I'm Chris William. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review provided by the Duke Endowment, BARINGS, Grant Thornton, Sunoco, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, and by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.com.